Welcome to the Tailored Life podcast, where we discuss practical science and not so common sense to live a life more extraordinary. So, let's get started. Here are your co-hosts, who are also partners in life and business, Luke and Rachel. Over the last several episodes, we've been slowly telling a story and hopefully unpicking things in a curated process to help people better understand what a path to vibrant well-being might look like. And while we have double tapped into some of these areas, I do only feel like we've scratched the surface. So you think about the health and well-being iceberg, we only see the very top, but there's all this that goes on underneath, often behind closed doors. And we've alluded to various things and behaviours and exercises that we do at the clinic, like working on boundaries and catching fireflies and all that kind of fun stuff. But I think today we were going to have a discussion that is really looking at the big difference between what we see in clinic and what people get fed in the real world. So what is our topic today?
Today we're talking about expectations and the expectations between what we see in clinic and what people come to us with. So often people come with expectations a little bit higher than what is actually achievable. Firstly, because this is what we're fed through the marketing engines, through what's happening in real life, through what family believe. It's just a common belief structure that people think they can get results quick. And I think that's part of the society we live in today, where we want everything now. Like I'm a millennial, right? I want it now.
Yeah. And the irony of this is that it's an undercurrent of the human condition, is that without radical communication around even like real information, how you're really feeling or how this information is shared in a truthful way, we either get fed the wrong information or we don't get fed information at all, which means we have these unreasonable expectations, which actually breeds into relationships and the journey of self-discovery. Because if you don't have really clear and realistic expectations and articulate that to others or articulate that to yourself, then you're already poised for failure. And so this sort of conversation is no different. The only exception to this is that the other side of the conversation is the multi-billion dollar fitness and health industry that wants to sell you something. And the quickest way to do that is to target that kind of quick fix. What can you get? What can you do with the least amount of discomfort? What pill can you take? How can this be done in 12 weeks? That is the miscommunication that's being shared to us, which is creating a very disparate set of expectations. That's really unfair.
Yeah, it's killing society, to be honest. We're in a obesity epidemic for a reason. There is obviously what is happening in the expectation standpoint, people going too hard too soon and not being able to sustain health. And there's obviously a whole bunch of other factors at play as well, such as marketing engines and what they're feeding us and all the things we've discussed in the past and we will discuss in the future as well. But I think one of the key things in a health journey is understanding those expectations so we can have long-term sustainable health.
And also understanding what is naturally going to sabotage. So at the end of the day, we are creatures of comfort. We are not genetically poised to desire happiness. We are genetically poised to desire laziness and comfort and using the least amount of energy possible to survive. We are genetically coded to do that. So if, for example, we've got the availability of delicious food that's been engineered to make us want it and want more, we've got a society and a general construct that really isn't hedged to the whole like, hey, let's live a healthful life. It's a, hey, let's live a life of comfort and convenience and, to be quite frank, indulgence. There's a degree of indulgence there. It's hard to have the discipline to step back from that and observe the entire world engine that is almost got you at the heart of it and all of the negative traits of humanness being exposed and used to sabotage your best interests. But it's also about understanding the real truth, that real health is actually slow health. And so let's talk about some of our in-clinic experiences here. You mentioned already that when people come to us, when they give us a call, when they complete a Find My Fit quiz or they word of mouth, whatever it might be, how does that conversation normally go?
Yeah, so I believe I've talked about this in previous episodes as well, but they come in all guns blazing. Motivation is high, and they're in a point of pain. So pain, discomfort, whether that pain is a physical pain or it's a psychological pain because they're overweight and not happy with themselves, or it's like an injury of something. They just want change now. And don't get me wrong, there's things we can do in the initial phase to alleviate that pain, but to have that long-term sustainable change, that takes so much longer. It is really about addressing the gap between motivation and expectation, because motivation is a great thing, and we need to really nurture that, but nurture that in a realistic environment. It's telling them what is achievable and what is not, and trying to make sure that they are still showing up and doing it.
And understanding why.
Yeah.
So in our 4-pillar health questionnaire that we have everyone do, usually when there's a next phase of having them come on board, it's about a 15-20 minute little assessment. And it has things like your short, mid, long-term goals, but also why. Why is today different? And that's also a big part usually of our reset program. So we have a popular reset program. It's by application only, but it's essentially minimum 12 weeks, but we often push it into 6 months. How do you ensure you've got this longitudinal change mindset? Because, again, we're not interested in the quick fix. I know we have a visceral reaction, almost an immune reaction, psychologically and emotionally, to these get fit fast, lose weight fast, fad diets. Every time we get a friend or family member say that they're joining some type of thing, awesome, at least they're doing something. To what extreme is a different conversation, but the thing that we always come back to is, what is your why? The why has to be strong enough to overcome any extrinsic sabotage or habitual change or habit that's currently eroding your health practices. And so double tapping into there, why is this important? Why now? Why us? That's quite a powerful mode of conversation and discovery.
On top of that as well is making sure that it's actually a why and it's not a goal. So we don't want to have these goal-orientated processes. So the goals are another thing alone, but the why is something that underpins those goals. It's something that transmits across all goals and all areas of life. A why is something that is not time-bound and you will never achieve it. It is a direction, I guess, of purpose. So what we're trying to get people is in tune with who they want to be as a person, who do they identify as, and why they really want to do what they want to do. So it's really get into those deeper motivations and helping them be the best person they can be. Because it's a good thing to have goals. Goals are great. But if you don't have a why that underpins, that helps that directory, it's pointless.
Yeah, I want to bring up an interesting moment. So there was one particular moment in my life where it was quite possibly the biggest change in my trajectory before I met you, before I went on the big health journey with Tailored and where we are now. And I remember my fundamental belief of who I am is I'm a pretty darn good person. Like, I try to make good decisions. I try to be a good person, to make good decisions, to be responsible, to be a good steward to the earth as best as I can, to be a good mom, a good friend, and ultimately come from a place of principles and expectations. That is my true north. And what I was experiencing was, I found out later, PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is a really extreme version of PMS. Really having a hard time with my mood, getting angry, really angry. I'm not an angry person generally, but I would just get so angry. And this is all tied up into the relationship, my prior marriage disintegrating. But I realized, like, this is not who I am fundamentally. And so there was a conflict in my why and my identity. So there's a huge identity intrinsic element that wasn't being met. And when I realized how angry I was and how frequent it started to become every month, I was like, this is not okay. And I went to the doctor and he put me on a contraceptive pill. But again, I started taking them, but I was like, this is not the answer. My why and who I am isn't that I depend upon drugs to fix this problem. There has to be a reason behind this.
Well, let's take a step back. It's not fixing the problem, it's fixing the symptom.
Yes, that's very true.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, it's creating its own set of symptoms and problems as a byproduct of that.
That's a whole other conversation, but yeah.
Yeah, and when I went down this rabbit hole, it was a deep reflection of this. Is this who I am? Am I just putting Band-Aids on this? Or am I genuinely someone who is interested in solving problems? Am I interested in asking the hard questions, which again is a part of my identity? And so I think I might have taken 4 pills that I was like, this is not who I am. And it really rubbed me intrinsically. And at that point in time, I was doing my research, and I know historically that exercise has been a really good thing for my mental health, particularly running, cardiovascular, but also some strength. And it was the first time in my life, because I was so incredibly unhappy and had such conflict with how I was behaving with my internal value set and my standards, that I just was like, 6 a.m, I'm showing up and I'm doing this app. I chose a specific app to do it, and I stuck with it. And every morning when the alarm went off, that I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person in that moment, that memory, that core memory that made me shake up and realize this is not my life. That was the thing that kept me going, because I was like, there's no way in hell I'm gonna sit back and watch myself become that person. And so that's an interesting moment in time where if something is bad enough, if the pain, not physical pain, but the emotional pain is bad enough and it conflicts so much with a core value, then that can be a huge and powerful intrinsic motivator. But then there's also an expectation set to navigate from there too.
And I think the key thing there is you picked one thing, right? Which was that 6 a.m, getting up, working out. And you picked a time in which is more achievable than anything really, because getting it done first thing in the day removes any kind of excuses you can create throughout the day, because we are excuse-making machines. We will always look and create a logic around, or post hoc reasoning around why we can't do that workout in the afternoon because we've got this meeting, we have to do this body of work, we need to meet this person, I need to walk the dog. Hey, we are great at making excuses for the things that we really don't want to do, but by picking that time in the morning where you don't have time to think about it, it's like, up, go. It's that classic, eat that frog. If you've read that book, it's a great book. The bottom line of it is doing the hardest thing first, so you're winning the day.
And greasing the wheels as best as you can.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of having your workout gear literally by the bed, so when you jump out, you put it on and you're off. Don't even think. If you just remove the thinking part of that, then you disarm the elephant and the rider, which is a concept from the Righteous Mind. And I think even understanding that was powerful, because it's like, how do I just remove the thinking part of my brain? Because we're so good at post hoc reasoning, which is getting ourselves out of things after the fact when we've made a specific decision. So we're great at justifying decisions we've made, even if it wasn't a logical or you hadn't think that decision through. We're great at explaining why we made that decision and justifying that away.
And I think the smarter you are with inside that space, the more you can do, because there's always a right and a wrong. You can always find a way around it. And I know myself as a practitioner, I can come up with some pretty elaborate excuses. So that's why discipline is just such a key thing. But it's coming back to that, what you did was picking that one thing and putting that discipline in that one thing. Because we've talked about this time and time again, people stack on way too much. And this is where it comes back to that motivation being extremely high at the start, and they just want to do everything. Like my old flatmate we've talked about in previous podcasts, where he comes in and he wants to do 10 new things. He's changing his exercise behaviours, he's changing his nutrition, he's
wanting to meditate.
Yeah. He's just trying to do everything at once, like ice baths and breath work, and it's amazing. It's all great things, but it's going to get to about the 3-week mark, generally speaking. They say it takes 21 days to create a habit. That's not actually, the numbers I think range from 18 days to 70 to I think is where the actual range is. So you can put around the 2-month mark is where a habit is actually formed. But the issue is motivation doesn't last that long. Motivation dwindles within that 2 to 3 weeks, when things start to get tough because you've stacked on a few extra hours in your day of doing all these list of things that you've never established in a habit, that you just can't sustain it. And then you feel like a failure. And then that creates that vicious cycle that we've talked about already. So what is so important is getting people to focus on that one thing and allowing that to build the motivation, because by achieving that thing every day, you're getting a dopamine response, a feel-good response. Your neurotransmitters are saying, good, I want more, because that was good, we won. And if you can keep doing that day on, day out, that just builds that and builds that. So what we're always doing at Tailored is trying to rewind the expectations, still trying to nurture that motivation and build that up, but trying to pick that one thing, that the minimal viable dose, effectively, that is going to make the most significant change in their lifestyle, that is so innocuous for the most part, that is just going to make positive change.
Yeah, but also falling in love with the process. So I think the biggest issue that happens also is you go into a specific activity, whether it be you start doing Tabata, maybe you choose 5 minutes of Tabata in the morning, and that's your minimum viable dose. You choose a couple of exercises, or whatever it might be, or even just maybe you do some jumping jacks. That's all you do for 2 minutes in the morning, is just that starting, once you put your feet out on the carpet or the floor after bed, you do a couple of jumping jacks or do it for a minute. And so whatever that is, like, stick to it, but it's also to fall in love with the process, not the outcome, because the reality is that it takes a lot longer than you usually expect, and this is their expectations, to see progress. And so I suppose the answer, or the question there is, why are you doing it? And if you don't fall in love with the process, you're automatically going to be tying yourself to an outcome that will far exceed that motivational timeline.
Yeah, and with that outcome, as soon as you achieve that outcome, oftentimes you do that marathon or you do that 10K run, whatever that is for you and your goal, so often you just see them fall off the wagon. As soon as they do it, done.
Or they achieve their goal weight and then the weight slowly creeps on again after time.
Because you just lax out, I can enjoy life again.
Yeah.
And that is a disaster waiting to happen. This is why it's focusing on lifestyle changes that are going to be sustained for your life. And I think meditation is another good example of this, because so many people try to do meditation. Like I continue to hear, I'm just trying to establish meditation practice. But too often people are just doing too much too soon. They're wanting to do 20 minutes a day or even 10 minutes a day. That's too much to start with. There's no chance there is a chance, but it's a very slim chance that you're going to be able to sustain that. Because if you haven't done meditation before, or even if you've done it intermittently, it is a process to craft that skill. And it is a frustrating process because you're training a muscle. And often people will just go way too much, way too soon. So it's wind it back, do 1 to 2 minutes. So oftentimes you can find a guided meditation for 1 to 2 minutes, or just count 10 to 20 breaths. That's meditation practice. That's bringing you present. It's detaching you from the past and the future and bringing you into that present moment. That's mindfulness. And then just doing that for a few months and then layering upon that. Okay, so I've done 2 minutes. Now I'm going to do 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just slowly but surely building that up and then stacking upon that to build another habit once that is well established and it is just ingrained and you don't have to think about it. It has to be autonomous.
And there's a nice thing to do is where you couple that with something that you love. So for example, perhaps you have a favourite probiotic drink or there's a decaf coffee bean that you like, or a tea. And so perhaps the habit first is you go get a cup of tea. And you sit down, and you may just sit down with your cup of tea where you'd be doing the meditation. You don't even have to meditate. But if it's something that you really enjoy, get that started first potentially, and then layer upon the meditation once you've created that new habit. But if you can try to combine something that you really deeply enjoy with something that you still haven't figured out if you like, or it's very new to you, that's also another awesome way to make that habit stick more. But getting back to expectations, the interesting part about expectations is we're already tackling or battling an inherently troublesome circuit in the brain. So I think there's a statistic around people will automatically overrepresent how much they actually did. I think the statistics is that 39% of men in this particular study and 29% of women overestimated or overwrote how much activity they did in a day. And so you automatically think you've done more, but when you actually write things down and what you actually did, it's quite a different story. And this is why we actually do enjoy wearables, because that can take that subjective, oh, this is what I did, with an objective, actually, this is actually what you did, and makes it a little bit more, I guess, that closing that gap of what you think you did and what you actually did to have more realistic expectations. But I was also thinking about our programs at the Hub. So we've tried a variety of duration programs from 6, 8, 12 weeks, all the way up to 6 months and 12 months. And there's this interesting sweet spot where I think people want fast results. So if they're given an option between a 6 and a 12-week program, they'll often go to the 6. They're like, oh, I can make some changes in 6 weeks. And so from a marketing end, and this is the conflict that we have, is like, from a marketing engine perspective, it is more favorable for us to market a 6-week program and make promises than it is a 12-week program, which we've settled on as our absolute minimum term. Like, we actually won't work with people for less than 12 weeks these days, because you really can't have the right kind of expectations to make true change until at least the minimum 3-month mark. And that's talking about really basic changes like improving your sleep, improving your hydration, starting to observe. Like, even those 3 things, that's a good chunk for a 3-month experience. But that often doesn't feel enough.
Siri's listening to us.
Refers to conscious events in general.
Thank you, Siri.
Or to the practical knowledge.
Always concerning when Siri's listening to our
Did
conversations.
you want to change your chair? I'm just conscious that
Squeaking,
it's
yeah.
squeaking.
Yeah.
Just, let's see where you are. No, you shouldn't be listening in the first place.
Good thing is we've got the lines in the ground.
Yeah, it's true. All right, let's get this one. Where's the other one? Had something on it. What's the advantage of higher pile carpet?
That's better.
Better? Yeah. I can see you like,
I was like, I'm trying to... Okay, buddy, you need to move, please. I love you, but can't be in here now, okay? Okay, go away, go away. Keep going, keep going.
And so I'm really curious about, I have to wait. I'm really curious about your experience from this, because again, you've been in this industry and working with clients way longer than I have. And what has been that tension?
Tension in regards to what?
What gets people in? Because if you're a business, you've got to get people in. Like, there has to be a lead generation, which needs to target specific motivation centers, which then makes commitments and decisions to sign up for a program. So from a business perspective, there's got to be something there that kind of baits people, which is always hard, but that's just how business works generally. So the difference between that, so getting people on board, and the tension with the knowing that it's going to take longer, particularly when they've got quite unreasonable expectations. What's that tension been like for you?
Yeah, so we refuse to drop to the tactics of other marketing engines. We don't want to promise the world, and the promises that we do make, we never say they're going to be quick. We can help you relieve pain in the short term. For example, when a client comes in with a musculoskeletal issue, they're getting a lot of chronic pain because maybe there's some misalignment and it's triggering something. So I can correct it in session, so I can get them walking out the door pain-free. But the issue with that is, much like a chiropractor or a physio, they're going to go back to pain within a couple of days, because I have aligned them, and now when they go back to their lifestyle, they're going to misalign themselves. So it's really kind of highlighting the importance of the sessions with us are important, but it's that transition time into your life that you need to really be looking at. And hence why lifestyle is number 2. You've got to have the mindset to show up, and the lifestyle needs to be wrapped around that. We're often having to take a completely different approach to most people. Most people just focus in session, what needs to be done, but we're actually looking at their lifestyle as well and how we can help support them in regards to that. So for example, a person coming in with that pain, it could be discovered that it's the way they're sitting at their desk. They're sitting at their desk and they're going like this, so they're locking up on their right side or whatever, they're shifting their postures. And often,
for those who are listening, you've just leaned in and rotated your torso, so it's a natural thinking pose, but you can see how it's really not balanced. So sorry, just, I know not everybody's looking at you.
Yeah, good point. And then from there's job imbalances as well, right? So whether you're a builder or like plumbers that are continually on the ground, on the floor, and driving, and there's all sorts of different postures in which we get ourselves into a daily basis. And actually, here's an example of one that I have had to unwind for myself. When I'm sitting at my desk, I always tuck my left leg underneath my right leg, which has caused a whole bunch of hip imbalances that I have to continually remind myself, place the feet square. And these small things make a profound difference, and it doesn't matter how many times you go and see your PT, your chiropractor, your osteo. If you don't change those things, it's not going to change a thing. And then on top of that, that's how you're physically holding your body. But how are you allowing your body to fix and repair itself? What are you nourishing it with? Are you giving it enough hydration? Because that's another thing I see continuously. People are coming in with chronic pain and they're not drinking water, and I'm like, your tissue is like all your soft tissue is majority water. Your fascia, which is your layer of connective tissue, that kind of white stuff that kind of sits around all your muscle tissue, that is 90% water, and it's a big part of a lot of people's problems because they're not drinking water, so therefore that's just not getting hydrated and it can't be pliable. And same with the muscle tissue as well, that needs water too, and your ligaments. And just, they're not nourishing it with simple things like water, or even the food that they're eating is too inflammatory, and they're eating foods that load them up with high inflammation, such as vegetable oils, sugar, and not really having that anti-inflammatory foods that's going to really support the inflammation levels. And then, coming into the way they train. As you can see, working through the 4 pillars, because it comes in this order, and it's an order of importance. Then they're going to a group training session where they're loading their asymmetries, which is the worst thing you can do. If you have a dysfunction or an imbalance, you don't want to load that. The more you load that, the more you ingrain those patterns into place. And that becomes extremely hard to unwind. You need to make sure you're mobilizing and getting the tissues moving as they should before you train those tissues. So we're ingraining functional movement patterns into place. We don't want to ingrain these dysfunctions into place, because it's just going to take you a lot longer to unwind, because you're telling your body that this is okay. This is the patterns I want to rebuild and make stronger.
And I think the most powerful kind of program that we see for this type of application is our functional movement screen. So we call it FMS for short, but even just getting people aware of how they're moving, what is their mobility like, have they got appropriate range of movement with their limbs, and in the same, is your one arm exactly the same as the other arm? And even getting people to see the difference in how their body is working can be really powerful, because then they realize, okay, up the chain, that's why I'm having pain in this place. And I think FMS screening, functional movement screening, there's no need for an extra S there, is actually a really powerful tool, and I wish actually happened in schools, or just as a mandatory thing for any kind of movement program, to have an FMS prior to all of that, so you can actually be aware and start to accommodate for those idiosyncrasies, also asymmetries, and then correct them.
Yeah, and the good thing is I do know a number of schools that have started to do it, because I know a number of the S&Cs that are placed in schools, so they are starting to do movement screening practices.
What are S&Cs?
Strength and conditioning coaches, sorry.
Yeah.
So the strength and conditioning coaches that are in some schools, the ones I know locally in Hamilton, some of the good schools are starting to do that, in particular in high schools, which is great to see. It's a transition, and it's going to take time to really make benefits, because I'm concerned about the kids of today with the postures in which they sit in with these technologies. So it is a really good thing that they're trying to catch them at that age. But to not go down that rabbit hole, because that's a whole different conversation in itself. Yeah, the functional movement screen has been it's been created by Gray Cook. He's one of the founders of functional movement, really. He's one of the original guys that has been really profound in the space for identifying these things. It's the most researched and quantifiable way to address issues. And we find it extremely powerful. But I guess the question you asked me prior to, where I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole of how do I manage expectations, and so I guess my point was I'm pulling out different points throughout their life and trying to make sure that it's not just focusing on that session, one session with them, but trying to highlight to them that it is a holistic view that we need to take around their life, and making sure that we're giving them the tools and strategies that they can implement in their life and take action, because we're only one piece of that puzzle. At the end of the day, it comes down to them, and we're here to help coach them to make the right decisions at the right time. So helping them delineate, do I need to do all of this? Or what is the one thing I could do right now that is going to have profound impact across all those things? So it's just really helping delineate that conversation around that one thing that they can do, and then how do we create a plan in which builds upon that?
Yeah.
It doesn't require loads of thinking and time, and that is a continuous thing that we're trying to do with all our programs, is keep it as time efficient for our clients as possible and basing it around their lifestyles. For example, if someone comes in for a movement program where they do the functional movement screen at the start of that, we have trained our practitioners up to not just create a standard movement program, whereas you're going through a hypertrophy program essentially, which is building muscle mass, where you'd be doing your bis and tris one day, then you'd be doing your back and whatever, like having a split cycle. We're not interested in that. It's not about that. There will be hypertrophy built into that, so building muscle mass, but it's built in a way that is integrated into your lifestyle. So, for example, if you need to get more movement into your life and you have a dog, it's okay, you're going to walk the dog, but before you walk the dog, I want you to do these exercises first, because we're going to help mobilize those tissues so we're not ingraining poor patterns into place. So actually your gait is walking in a better way, so you're ingraining those patterns into place.
But that's so conflicting in what we get fed. If you look at magazines, if you look at social influencers, if you look at Rocky, every movie, every kind of protagonist succeeding or whatever it might be, it's truncated, because of course you can't actually go behind closed doors and talk about the really boring stuff that happens. There's a lot of boring stuff. You're right, underneath the iceberg. And that needs to be reframed in the fact that this is what life's all about. It's the underneath the water, underneath the surface iceberg stuff, which is boring and tedious, and sometimes, actually most of the time, you don't want to do it. And I just posted a reel with Mel Robbins saying, you're never going to feel like it. So A, you're never going to feel like it, and B, no one's coming.
And especially if it's something that you really need. Generally, that's the thing. The hardest thing is generally the right thing, because you don't want to do it. Like, it's a sign that you need it, because we need to be pushing those limits, because if you're not growing, you're dying, essentially.
Yeah. One of the biggest frustrations that I'd love to share, and we've actually still got a video, and I think we should put the link in the show notes. But when I started my journey with Peddled, I was working out, doing resistance training, 30 minutes resistance training every second day. I was running 3 miles or 5 kilometers every alternate day. Sometimes I'd run, if I was trying to manage my stress, twice in a day if I needed to, but that was my stress management at the time. And I was super fit, like doing really well. I hadn't yet had my shoulder injury because of the overuse. So, of course, when you're in that moment, you're like, yeah, I feel fit and strong. But I was having issues with my gut. Like, I was just really struggling to be able to eat, had a lot of distension in my belly, a lot of pain, a lot of gas, generally very highly strung. That's why I was running so much, to manage all of that sort of tension. And I remember the Dr. Stark, which was one of the people that worked with you at the time. She was my coach, my health coach, and my biochemist and geneticist. And so we ran many diagnostics, not all of them. But what was apparent was high stress, right? And so she asked me, I was having a session with her, and I was talking to her about how I was doing stress management. And she said to me something to me that just really bugged me. She was like, Rach, maybe your body doesn't need to be doing what it's doing right now. Maybe your body just needs to be walking and finding quiet, calm, finding slowness. And maybe it just doesn't need to be running or working out like you are.
Because I want to give a bit more context to this. On top of this, you're in a very stressful startup, traveling to America a lot. You were working very long hours and, a very stressful role. That's all stacked on top of this with 2 kids, a recent divorce. There was a whole bunch of external things going on there as well that you haven't even touched on. Effectively, you were just at this big ball of stress, and you were putting more stress and more stress on top, because although movement and good doses is amazing for us, you were just putting stress on top of stress. Because like we talked about the hormetic stress in the past, and you'd gone beyond the hormetic to the chronic stress. Like you're just layering it on and really hurting yourself to some extent, even though you were doing what may have helped you in the past, but your stress levels were more manageable then, where now it's just gone too far. And it doesn't matter where that stress is coming from in our lives, as we've talked about, it's all compounds.
But I remember videoing that first walk.
Yeah.
I was so frustrated. And it's often a video we show some of our other high performers that are equally in the same boat. And it's just a temporary thing. Just let's diffuse the system. Let's start to unwind the ball of string. But I always laugh at that video because I remember being so incredibly frustrated and uncomfortable at slowing down. And even as a person who is as health conscious as I am, who is usually pretty committed, if I say I'm going to do something and it's in line with my values, I'll usually do it. But having such a different approach to my well-being was a very difficult page to turn in that chapter book. And so we'll put it in the show notes because it just hopefully it'll make you laugh as much as it does looking at it now. But
definitely watch it. It's quite enjoyable.
But I think managing expectations, it takes time to unwind. It takes time to start to observe. And we mentioned it in the previous episode around using wearables that can help provide a little bit more insight into those changes.
Before we go there, I just want to talk further around your case, and in particular, others like you. So I have obviously dealt with a lot of high performers over my time, and many in which are doing strenuous activities. For example, my history is Ironman, so I have dealt with a lot of Ironman athletes that are very high-level executives, and they've got families. So much like you, they were pushing the envelope in all areas of life. And they're often overweight as well. You would think somebody that is training to do an Ironman and they're training 20, 30 hours a week, and they've got to be fit and healthy, right? But because they're just putting so much stress load onto themselves, they're carrying a weight because their body's trying to survive. I'm in a stress state. I'm preparing, like, I don't know what's coming, but I need to hold on to this. And so often by getting them to do less, their performance increases, their weight decreases, the energy increases, like everything just becomes better just by taking that little step back. And the same things apply for when I'm dealing with clients that are carrying like excess weight, and maybe they're not training, but they've got a very stressful life where they're a single mum and working 9 to 5 and haven't got a second job to pay the bills, and just a very stressful life, but they're carrying a lot of extra weight. Oftentimes, and then for these people, oftentimes they will be trying to do it through exercise, and then they'll be going to the gym every day for an hour.
And they'll be eating salads and
eating salads, yeah. So they're putting a lot of stress in their body. It sounds good from the outside that they're doing the right things. They're going to the gym every day, they're eating salads, and not eating a calorie deficit. But all these things are stresses, from putting your body through that much stressful exercise every day through to being at a calorie deficit, and quite a severe calorie deficit oftentimes, because they think less is better. And often, so what I generally get these people to do is, you're going to eat more, you're going to train less. And instead of doing all this kind of training you're doing, we're going to do a couple mobility exercises. So we're going to reduce the tension in your body. And all of a sudden, this weight falls off.
But it just flies so aggressively in the face of everything that we're taught. And I think that until you either have an aha moment that you try this, and you try it for long enough, like minimum 12 weeks, no less.
And then with that clients that I've done this time and time again, especially with the weight loss one, like it's a bit more of a transition with the A-type Ironman athlete because they're very locked in to what they're doing, and they're generally still wanting to do Ironman, so there's that kind of delicate balance there. But with the weight loss client, by actually giving them that break, I'll get them to do less and just not the right things and being really efficient with the right things, like I will see significant results in 12 weeks. And I'll never, I never promise that, but it's by getting them to do less and eating more. It's always been so profound to me that people just cause so much pain on themselves and get further away from their goals. It's like
following the narrative.
The dogma.
Now, more of the right things, though.
Oh, 100%. It's got to be. It's very particular about doing the right things, and I think that's the nuance of why it's good to have a coach that understands the nuances of these things and the accumulation of stress, and understanding from a holistic perspective, not just looking at it from a movement lens or a nutrition lens. They all compound, and you need to understand that and really address everything from mindset, lifestyle, nutrition, and movement.
So I want to talk about the tension between expectations, timelines, and the concept between the one thing that's super disciplined and what you've talked about is the 80-20 rule. Progress, not perfection. So there's this sort of trifecta of how long for, whether it's disciplined or if there's just purely progress versus perfection. How does that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the 80-20 principle, it is a great principle for general life. But when we're talking about that one thing, this one thing should be so inconsequential. Is that right?
Yeah.
Sorry. The one thing should be so inconsequential that it is just so small, it should not impact you in any way. And if you can't do it, and there's the tension between you doing it and not doing it, it is too big. It should not be a significant task to get you to do it. For example, if you wanted to create a meditation practice, we've talked about this already, doing 10 to 20 breaths, easy. If you are not drinking enough water in the day, having a glass first thing in the morning, straight after waking, because we've talked about this in the past, in the sleep podcast episode, where you're dehydrated for 8 hours, you need to rehydrate, and that's a great time to kickstart your hydration for the day. So yeah, whether it's having a glass of water first thing in the morning, whether it's doing the star jumps or the burpees first thing in the morning, just doing 10 of those every day, these things are so simple and so easy that there should be no excuse.
So 80% in this case, when you're implementing a new habit, is not good enough when it comes to the one thing.
In my opinion, when it comes to the one thing, this is where you craft the muscle of discipline. And as we talked about earlier as well, is eating that frog. Try to do it earlier in the morning when your motivation is high, there's no excuses, and making sure it is stacked upon an existing habit as well. For example, if it's the drinking water or anything really, like first thing in the morning, brush your teeth, drink a glass of water, or brush your teeth, do your 10 burpees, brush your teeth, do your meditation, your 10 to 20 breaths. Trying to stack it on an existing habit, a habit that happens every day, so you know what time zone this is happening in and when it happens. Because if you don't keep it consistent, because we are habits of creature, and if you don't have that...
Creatures of habit.
We're creatures of habit, and if you don't have that habitual nature to your day, it's going to get lost. So you need to make sure it is a routine that you're trying to establish, so it becomes an autonomous habit. I brush my teeth, I do whatever is after that, or it doesn't have to be after brush your teeth. It's just...
That's an example
of a autonomous habit that I hope happens every day or every morning. So yeah, so that is what we're talking about when we're talking about the difference between, obviously 80-20 is a great principle for life and for doing the good things right, but when it comes to the one thing, that is the one thing that has to happen, and you need to craft that muscle of discipline, which is going to reward you. You're going to get these dopamine responses because you're doing it every day, you're succeeding, you're winning the day.
So how long is this one thing and this non-negotiable daily commitment, and this exercise of discipline, how long should that happen for that one thing?
Yeah, this is where it becomes hard because there's no kind of clear line in the sand. It's everyone's an individual, and how well they go at doing this is going to change because it depends on how many habits you've built in the past. If you've built that muscle or have you not built that muscle? If you've got no life by design, it's going to take a lot longer than somebody like us that has been crafting a life by design. For me, I've been stacking upon for the majority of my life. I've been building. Yeah, there's variability. As with anything in health, we are individuals. We must address the individual. The key thing you need to be identifying is, when do I not have to think about doing this? It just happens. When is it autonomous? But you'll be probably looking for at least a month before you start stacking on another habit. You don't want to be increasing or stacking on another habit within a month. You want to make sure it's well established with at least a month, probably up into 2 months. Obviously, we're starting really small, so in that month or two, you can start to build upon that maybe a little bit or stack upon it, but I wouldn't go any sooner than a month.
And so at that point where it feels autonomous and you find yourself doing it without thinking, at that point, does that shift to the 80-20 and then you'd be stacking off a new one thing?
Yeah, so
how does that work?
Yeah, so in the transition period, it's like you want to try and build upon both habits, right? So once I like to have at least 2 non-negotiables once it gets to that point, right? So you got, like when you're trying to establish a new one, so you've got that old one because you want to maintain that habit, you don't want to lose that habit. So there's this transition period where you've got the existing one thing and then the new one thing. Those things have to be consistent for a period of time because we're trying to layer upon that and stack on those habits. But then it transitions to a period of going to like the 80-20 because it should be autonomous by that point, and you can just, if, for example, you're running out the door and you don't have time, you know, that one can be missed out, but the new one thing has to happen.
Got it. And so what I would hazard to guess, because at least this is how I've found it work with the structure of our 12-week programs, there's usually 2 to 3 habits that will be focused during that 12 weeks, which we talked about last time, that after the 12 weeks, what's interesting is when I ask people, like, how do you think it has gone? They think, yeah, I'm now going to bed, it lights out at 10. I'm now not looking at my cell phone and scrolling through news right before bed. And I'm now drinking a glass of warm water in the morning with some lemon. After 3 months, when you actually look at those 3 habits, it's interesting unpacking it with them and the internal tension as a coach, because you want to give these people the world, but at the same time you know that this stuff takes time. So I think I've been working with you and I've changed these 3 habits and they're working fairly well. They don't usually get the aha moments that's created profound shifts until we actually keep layering upon and actually show them the trajectory of their subjective measurements, which goes back to our last episode where we talk about how do we ask questions around how they're feeling across, I think there's 7 key axes, and I'll get you to repeat those 7 key axes, but it's not until we plot their answers to the 7 key axes over that 12-week period of time that they realise, actually, I am feeling a lot better and there's only been 3 new habits. But there's this tension as a coach where you want people to see results and relatively fast. But the knowing we have that actually those small little things creates profound overall change, but you've got to help lay the path. So what are those 7 axes?
Yeah, so it's on a 1 to 10 kind of scale. And the first one's energy. Second one, mindset, lifestyle, nutrition, movement, sleep, and pain. So always 10 is a good number. So even with pain, 10 is a good number. Anything on the kind of lower end of the spectrum, we need to address. Yeah, that is extremely important, and I think the other, beyond the questionnaires that we do in that regard, and the partner is another key part of that as well. So if they have a partner or a family, it's hearing from their perspective, because often, like I think we mentioned last time, they're the ones that see the change, and the individual themselves just doesn't, because they're in their body every day. They don't feel a transition as such.
Health creep goes both ways.
Yeah.
Health creep downwards and health creep upwards.
Yeah. So look at the people around you that are closest to you that can actually see the change. Even some of those that are a little bit more distant to you and just might see every now and then, because often they'll be the ones that will see the change more profoundly because they don't deal with you on a daily basis. But yeah, oftentimes I talk to the client's partner or family or whatever it may be, and that's where the most profound impacts are seen, as you've mentioned in our last episode. But then obviously what else we mentioned in the last episode was looking through to tracking the data through diagnostics and wearables. Would you like to share a bit about that?
So, I mean, we've found, and we talked about it at length, around how wearables can help reconnect the three brains. If that's a new concept to you, there's a couple of episodes ago we talked about that at length too. But the health creep, as I mentioned, is real. Health creep downwards on a downward trend is real, where between a 6 to 12 month period, you might not be realizing you're making certain decisions or habits, but you'll find yourself 5 kilos heavier or 10 pounds heavier, and you're like, how the heck did I get here? That's health creep downwards. Health creep upwards might be the slow loss of weight, where actually you're not paying attention to it necessarily, but then you get on the scales after 6 months and you're like, actually, this daily walking practice with my dog and perhaps increasing my water intake is actually working. And so health creep upwards is the right kind of creep, is slow and insidious, but in the case of positive health creep is always delightful, because progress usually happens while you're busy making the plans of other things in your life, where other goals that you might have, or just enjoying the process. And so, but wearables can help you supercharge that experience, because you can actually start to see the biometrics responding to those decisions a lot sooner than the sort of subjective attitude of whether or not I'm feeling better. But ultimately, I think a 12-week chunk is like the sweet spot. And another sweet spot is that one thing per month. If we look at a person who's making good progress, I think that's probably a reasonable timeline. And I'm not even talking about an outcome. So say, for example, your desired outcome is to lose some weight. Getting our detective hat on, we'll be looking and going back to some of our previous episodes. All right, how has the weight crept on? What's going on in your life that's creating stress? What are you putting in your mouth with respect to nourishing yourself or not nourishing yourself?
And keeping in mind that weight is a symptom, once again.
Weight is a symptom. Yes, increasing weight is a symptom, not the root cause. And so if you've got your detective hat on and you're actually saying, why have I started to gain weight? What has changed? What about the way that I think, my goals or lack thereof, my daily decisions, my lifestyle has changed, or the way I'm eating or moving, that has actually meant that my weight has crept up? And so once you realize that, you think, all right, my biggest contributor, I think, to the weight gain is I'm really loving this new food I found at the supermarket, or maybe it's some cookies after dinner. And maybe the one thing is I'm not going to change anything but not have those cookies after dinner. And so your success metric for at least 1 month is to not have cookies after dinner.
But the trick there is replacing if you're removing a habit, replacing that existing habit with a new habit. So replacing those cookies with a tea.
Cup of tea.
Because you got to, and this is one thing I want to talk about in the future, and I think it's going to be definitely one of our future podcasts, if not our next one, which is habit change. So it's understanding that trigger, that response, and that action. So that's the kind of habit loop that we need to really unpack to understand why you do what you do. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but long story short is the habit of having that cookie is there oftentimes for a reason. We need to find what that reason is, and we need to fill that reason with a healthier habit.
Yeah.
And that is going to make your life so much infinitely easier.
Yeah. It also has a wonderful mind play, because when you feel like you're subtracting enjoyment from your life, you're automatically like, I'm taking a little bit of magic from my life. I'm taking a little bit of happiness, which is there for a reason. So again, unpacking or journaling or observing, okay, what is the reason for that? But keeping something in there that is still potentially enjoyable or fills the gap, because it's like when you remove something, it creates almost a vacuum. And so filling it with something that's more healthful can make a nice transition. So perhaps for the first 4 weeks, it's okay, all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be replacing those 2 cookies after dinner with a cup of peppermint tea, or find a lovely tea that really looks yum, or get a new mug with a tea that you want to be able to drink out of. So maybe for 4 weeks, that's all you do.
Or if you want to keep that, you go like a cacao, not a hot chocolate, getting a nice rich cacao, which is going to give you that kind of chocolatey kind of nature, and it's still quite close to it, but a way healthier option. Just making sure it's not cacao that is pumped full of like processed sugar, but it's like literally just a cacao with healthy fats.
And potentially adding in like bone broth or some type of peptide protein. I mean, again, there's ways you can kind of hack that experience, creates a more nourishing outcome, but still provides satisfaction of sort of chocolate or, you know, that ooh, it's something luxurious and delicious. And so, okay, so getting back to this goal of losing weight, maybe it's okay, that's the first 4 weeks, because perhaps nothing else in your life at that time feels like it can be achieved. So maybe you've got a big work deadline, maybe you are burning the candle at both ends. Again, that's a bigger problem, but perhaps for that 4 weeks, that's all you're doing around the cookies. That does not mean that you don't change the other issues that are happening. So maybe, again, you've got a big project or you're burning the candle at both ends, going to bed late, waking up early. So maybe the second month, when that project is wound down a little bit, you focus on your sleep. So it's like the 3-2-1 sleep principle. That's all you're doing to add upon the new hot chocolate, or not hot chocolate, but cacao or tea. So then for that second month, you're not only doing your wind down tea or whatever that exchange is, but you're also doing the 3-2-1 sleep principle, or just focusing on getting to bed at a certain time that's earlier than normal. And maybe that's what you focus on, that second 4-week chunk.
And this is where I like to flip it on its head, depending on the individual, depending how much capacity they have, is where the one thing is the one thing, that is the 100%. And then the others, the accessory things that are important but not as important, they're in the 80%. So wherever you can, get to them. But this is the one thing you need to focus on. And then obviously as we transition, that kind of flips. So it's just trying to understand the priority structure to really making that transformational change over the long term.
And this is where working with a coach is profound, because sometimes, particularly with people who don't have a full-time job in the health area, or the practical health coach, or more of an executive or performance health coach area, you don't necessarily know what key habits are the like leverageable habits, where in fact it'll have the most profound change should you actually instill this particular habit, like sleep. But in this particular example, we're layering on the sleep thing. We usually do sleep straight away, but again, we're just bringing some nuances here. That second set of 4 weeks will be implementing the new sleep. And then the third month, the third set of 4 weeks, you've got the exchange of the cookies, you've got improved sleep habits. Those two things pretty much stick to the groove that you've created. To your point, you might have an 80-20% like flux there, but ideally you'd keep them the same. And then you might add on, what would you add on the third month, for example? Would it be just water, glass of water in the morning?
Yeah, so something like a glass of water can be extremely powerful, especially if they're not drinking enough water. Water is so important, as I talked about it. It just goes under every part of your health. So if you want more energy, weight loss, if you're wanting better tissue management, if you're wanting, there's just endless benefits of water. Like we've talked about it many times before. It is in all of our cellular processes.
Yeah, and so say for example, this third set of 4 weeks is maybe you do a glass of warm water as soon as you wake up, or whatever that might be. So the order here is not hugely important in this example. You're just focusing on one thing. And that one thing, whatever that is, it's still just one thing and it's super important. So say that third set of 4 weeks, you implement the water. And so at the end of that 12-week period, you might get on the scale, because we'd advise you just not even bothered getting on the scale, because that's not the point of this exercise. The point of this exercise is to create new habits that are hopefully improving your overall outcome.
And weight loss is a symptom, so why would we measure?
Yeah, but in this case, you'd be looking at your 7 axes. Are you feeling any better? But also you might get on the scale after that 3-month period, and I will guarantee you would have seen health creep in the right direction after something like that.
And something like on top of that, as we talked about with wearables and how that would be used in that context, we'd be looking at the nervous system, looking at their lie detector, which is their resting heart rate and heart rate variability. So where is that sitting? Because we want to see heart rate variability go higher and resting heart rate go lower. So are they going in the right direction, or are they going in the wrong direction? That gives us answers to what's happening with their nervous system.
Yeah, but I mean, we just broke down a 3-month experience for someone who's found that they've gained weight. and 3 simple habit changes that within that 12-week period they could easily implement. Those aren't difficult things to do, and that would probably be a very fair thing to try.
Yeah, and all the while in this process as well as also us discovering who they are. So there's a lot more behind the scenes of really assessing and understanding the individual and trying to figure out what are those one things or that 80%. So there's a lot more behind the curtain that the client doesn't see until we get into that next 12 months and then
12 weeks.
12 weeks, sorry. Yeah, so it's definitely a process.
Yeah, got it. Now, anybody who's not watching this right now, what we've tried to work through is one of our cats jumping on my lap, and
dribbling.
And you've got an older cat when it's like the idea of being snuggled is, I can't keep is to keep control of my salivary glands and my mouth being open or shut. I digress. So we're going to keep moving forward. Those who are watching on video, this is a nice little cameo of truffles, but just so you kind of create a mental construct of what that looks like. Okay, I do want to create a caveat here. The example 3 kind of habit shifts, I've never done it that way before. Usually it's something like sleep is the very, very first thing. So sleep would be the biggest thing. Usually, secondly, would be creating meditative breaths or helping to control their nervous system. So normally that would be my sort of second. And thirdly, it might be starting to either increase water or start to like journal their nutrition. Like, how do I feel when I eat certain foods? What are the triggers, or where do I go for comfort? It's actually being more of an observer throughout maybe that third cycle of 4 weeks. And it doesn't matter what necessarily they are. Through our coaching experience, we've found the things and the habits that create the biggest impact depending on their unique circumstance. Because again, everybody's different. Everybody's type of stress, type of trigger, type of issue, type of core issue that are reading their symptoms would be different. But this is just an example that we've provided to get a feel for how those expectations can be managed and what you can achieve in sort of the 12-week period.
Yeah. So in this, we've covered a lot of ground around expectations. We've covered a lot of topics that we've talked about in the past and given a bit more colour to them. I would love to kind of wrap this up and kind of come to what is the one thing from this podcast that we want to imbue to the listeners and they take home and apply. So I'd love to know, what is your one thing?
Well, before you started to say that, the one thing I wanted to bring up was actually, and I'll wrap it into this, answering this question, is the expectation. Say you're trying to lose weight for a wedding. You've got 3 months, and maybe you do, that is a big enough why as a time point for you to do all the things you think you must do to lose that weight, which you've already mentioned for the most part is usually well over what you should do, and in fact puts your body more at a state of survival and a hoarding of your basic functions, whether it be fat, whatever it might be. But I do want to set a very clear expectation. Real health is slow health. And if you are trying to do something within like a deadline, like a 12-week deadline, unless you've done these habit change or these things sustainably, for the most part, as soon as people hit that wedding day, they'll go back to their normal life. And I can bet you good money that they'll go back to where they were, either the same as just as fast, if not faster, because they haven't done it for the right long-term reasons.
And generally worse too.
And generally overreach their weight, so they'll even gain more weight because of that kind of process. And so the one thing that as a result, I want to talk about is if you understand that the body is resistant to change, and understand equally that you've got to stack things gently to improve your health creep to a positive direction. Conversely, you have to understand that if you try to do things fast, your body will try to bounce back where it was as quick as possible as soon as you take away those sort of habits.
Yeah, because we have a set point, right? Our body wants to say the set point, that's homeostasis.
Yep.
It's its equilibrium or its balance point that it's just going to fight its hardest to stay there.
Yep. It knows where you are. It wants to stay where you are, even if it's not where you want to be. your body will fight to stay there.
Because that's what it knows.
Because that's what it knows. It's comfort, it's the condition that it's in. And if you want long-term change, you need to have a long-term view. And you equally need to pace and make those small changes in a sustainable way, like we mentioned, across the 4 key pillars. But conversely, if you want to have quick change, expect quick change back again because of that same kind of conflict that happens.
Yeah.
What about you?
No, I think that was pretty much where I was going to go as well.
Sorry.
It's a lifestyle change, right? And I think too often people have these short-term goals, and it's like really coming back to that why and focusing on that really long-term. The thing that you're stacking in is not just here for this year or this month, next few months. It's here for your life. Like we've recently included ice bath into our daily routine, and I transitioned that from cold showers to the ice bath. And don't get me wrong, I hate it, but I love it at the same time because of the benefits that it provides us, and we feel amazing afterwards. You never are disappointed after the ice bath. You just feel, you're always smiling and you're just full of energy, and it's because you've done it, you succeeded. And like, it would be easy to put this kind of construct that it's not going to be part of my life, it's just for this time period. But no, I'm going to be doing an ice bath for the rest of my life. And I just need to settle into that. And that is one of my habits that I'm just going to build upon. Like the rest of our morning routine, it is what it is, and it's just going to keep getting built upon. And it really comes down to that why that we've talked about. So really having such a strong why, because it needs to be a strong why. To get into that goddamn ice bath, it needs to be a strong why. But because I want to live a life by design and be my best self and continually striving to grow and learn, I get into the ice bath every single day because, my God, I perform so much better with that ice bath. Much like the rest of our morning routine, you just need to understand a life by design is not a life that is easy. Easy decisions equals hard life. Hard decisions equals an easy life. If you make those hard decisions, especially up front, if you can put it when the motivation's high in the early hours of the morning, when you have no choice to make those decisions, you're setting yourself up for an easy life. So by just doing those right things each and every day, do the hard choices to get that easy life.
And I think having a life by design does require planning. Like it does require pulling away the default constructs of getting up and just going with the flow, and it's actually saying, no, what do I want my life to mean? What do I want to be on my deathbed? Hopefully when you've had a full, beautiful life, that you've been running around after the grandkids or achieving your physical goals for absolutely as long as possible. And on your deathbed you say, actually, did I live a life using all of the things, all the tools, all the passion, all of the things that was given to me as a part of your form? Or did I just go with the flow and do what was comfortable?
Default mode.
Or easy at the time. And I think having that master construct of like, what does an amazing life look like, does require sitting down and reflecting upon. And then once you have what you want, you can reverse engineer what a daily life looks like to be able to lead into that. And oftentimes people aren't coached to be able to do this. And this is where we end up working with people who are saying, look, I'm not necessarily well equipped to help myself design a life. And this is where we step in. But a big part of that is helping them get back to basics. What is your why? And what does a life that you'd be really happy look like? And then how do we reverse engineer that to daily activities, daily decisions, daily habits that can feed into that life by design?
And get started today.
Today. Yeah.
Don't put it off. Just wait until the new month or wait until next week, Monday.
It drives me crazy when I speak to people like, I'll start on Monday. And I'm like, what are you starting?
Yeah.
What are you waiting for? No one's coming to keep you accountable to Monday.
Yeah. This is
you. You're an adult.
It's consequential. This is a glass of water. 2 minutes of counting your breath or doing 10 burpees.
Yeah.
Like these things are so small. You don't need to wait.
If you're saying to yourself, I'll start on Monday, I think you already have the wrong attitude.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, so perhaps have another re-listen to this episode, perhaps start from the very beginning on this podcast too, and then just understand that today is the day you can make a change. It doesn't have to wait for tomorrow.
Yep.
Yep.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. We are so grateful for you being here. We want to help make the path to vibrant wellbeing less lonely and confusing, so please let us know how we can do that better. Like, subscribe and share with your loved ones who you think could benefit from these topics, because that raises the bar for everyone.